Hello, I'm Nathan with the Community Library Network, and this is the second video in our 2020 Teen Summer Writing Series. In our last video, I guided you in thinking about some topics you might want to write about. Then you narrowed those topics down to 3, thought about what they would look like in different forms, and have been mulling them over throughout the week. By now, you probably have a pretty good handle on what you could write about. One thing creative nonfiction writers usually do that's different from fiction or poetry writers is they pitch their projects prior to writing them. It's one thing to write a fictional novel and then go pitch it to agents and publishers. It's quite another to do several years worth of research for a long-form journalism piece, or pay for that epic trip to write a travelogue and not know if anyone is going to buy it. That's why creative nonfiction, for most working writers, is often pitched first. So what's a pitch? Well, put simply, a pitch is a statement that shows the idea and scope of your narrative. It's a distillation of your idea. You are communicating the important information of your narrative and trying to entice someone into wanting to hear your story. There are some examples of pitches on pages 6 and 7 of the workbook. If you haven't got a copy of the workbook, there's a link below that will take you to it. I'm going to read the shortest pitch in that workbook here. Someone paints the words poopy pants, stinky butt, and pee-pee in festive red, white, and green spray paint on the side of a school. As the police were investigating the incident, they decided to try to shame the perpetrators into turning themselves in by pointing out that Santa Claus knows what they did. They never found who caused the several $100s of damage, but somewhere there's a kid who is living with the guilt. Forming a pitch is useful in helping you to focus on the essence of your story. In the pitch I just read, which was turned into a published story, you can see the progression of the story and are enticed to find out about the kid who is living with the guilt. To put together a good pitch, you need to understand your narrative arc. So what's a narrative arc? The narrative arc is the path your story takes. While writers of creative nonfiction can't make up facts, they can choose how and when to reveal them to make them interesting for the reader. Sometimes that's in chronological order. Other times they start with the end and circle back to the beginning. There are some other options too, but it's important that you think about it as a writer so that you can make your story compelling for your reader. Considering we're looking at writing shorter pieces under 2,500 words, I'm going to cover a simple way that you can structure your story. It's not the only way, so feel free to explore some other ways that you can craft your narrative arc. By now, we should all be familiar with a basic story structure. A good story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Aristotle pointed that out over 2 millennia ago. There's good reason why we still refer to it. It's because it works. If you're telling a story about a trip you took, the chronological format lends itself well to the form. If you're examining a revelation in a personal essay, unveiling it a portion at a time to the climax of the revelation creates a memorable effect. If you're writing about the creek behind your house, all of the plants that you see, and the creatures, and why you love it, the form can help you organize it all. You can see the versatility here, and most of all, your reader is going to appreciate the attention you spend in organizing your story for them instead of just haphazardly throwing it on the page. Sometimes you should consider breaking from this form. Let's say you're doing a long-form journalism piece about a murder, not unlike how Truman Capote did in the example that's in the workbook. It might be better to start with the crime and then circle back to how it was committed, with your climax being the point where all of the evidence points to the murderer. If you want to map this type of structure out, it would make a big circle. If you're looking at using the beginning, middle, and end model, there's this guy named Gustav Freytag who helped to take Aristotle's idea and modernize it. What he came up with is commonly referred to as Freytags Pyramid. If we look at Freytags Pyramid, we start with some exposition. This is the setup where you ground your reader in the world that you're presenting on the page. Maybe that's going tubing down the Coeur d'Alene River, or maybe it's standing on a bridge in Selma, Alabama, marching with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Wherever and whenever your story is taking place, your reader should have an understanding of the situation. Your exposition shouldn't necessarily be dry or even overtly stated. Often, it's much better to paint a picture with words rather than only state facts. Just the facts is for newspaper journalists and not creative writers. After the setup, you come to the rising action. This is where you're building tension and suspense to maintain your reader's interest. For your reader, the rising action should fill them with a sense of uncertainty as complications or conflict increases toward the climax. The climax is the height of the action, where the tension, suspense, and conflict are at their highest. After the climax, we start down the falling action side of the pyramid. There's often a reversal where something changes permanently. In creative nonfiction, this could be a profound realization where your view of the world will never be the same. Or it could be an epic festival that happened to coincide with your travels. There are lots of things that could be framed as a reversal without changing the facts of the situation. The action continues down toward the point where all of the tension and suspense is released, and the reader comes away with a deeper understanding about your topic. This is the satisfying ending that helps to bring your reader back out of the story and into their own lives. There are illustrations of other ideas for story structures you can use on pages 38 and 39 of the workbook as well. Understanding what type of structure you think you might use will help you in crafting your pitch. At the very least, you need to understand where the starting place of your story is, what the hook is, that's the part that drags your reader into the story, what the climax is, and how you will bring your story to an end for the reader. Now that you've put some thought into how you structure your story, take the 3 topics you've narrowed your choices down to, pick your 2 favorites, and you're going to craft a pitch for each. Your pitch shouldn't be long. You should be able to deliver it in about a minute. Because it's designed to be very succinct, you don't want to clutter it up with unnecessary information. For this reason, many writers stick to a formula that works well for most stories: the situation, event, reaction, effect model. That's pretty simple. All you have to do is touch on a situation that caused an event, which prompted a reaction, and finally had an effect or an outcome. Simple, right? So when you look at your 2 topics, what's the situation? What event did it lead to? What reaction to that event happened? And what was the outcome that came of it? Think back to the vandalism pitch that we talked about earlier. The situation is the graffiti. The event is the police investigation. The effect was an unsolved case. And the outcome that we promised to explore is the guilt that some kid feels. Did you notice that the outcome is left vague? That's by design. Your pitch isn't your full story in a nutshell. It's supposed to capture the interest of the potential reader and entice them to read your story. That's it. Once you understand your situation, events, reaction, and effect, you get to put your personal spin on it. This is when you start honing in on your pitch, and there's spaces for you to write your pitches down on pages 41 and 42 in the workbook. Now that you have your 2 pitches, you have to deliver them to someone. Ideally, we would be delivering these in person to a group of your writing peers. But we aren't in an ideal situation right now. Your job this week is to find a couple of objective people to pitch to. When I say objective, I mean people who don't have any bias to what you're talking about. If one of your pitches is for a personal essay about how your mom embodies your vision of a hero, don't pitch to your mom. Don't pitch to your grandma, your dad, or your aunt either. Instead, find a close friend who can provide some unbiased feedback. That isn't to say that those people wouldn't provide you good feedback, but their opinion of your pitch is inevitably going to be influenced by their own experience of your mom. And you don't want that. You can pitch in person, over the phone, or online, but there are some things you want to find out from the person you're pitching to. The feedback you get from your pitches will help you better understand what your reader finds interesting, aspects of your story you may want to leave out, things you may need to do more research on, perspectives you should consider as you write, and many other useful things. The key is to listen to what the person you pitch to has to say. Think about it, and move forward from a more informed position. If they are telling you something isn't working or isn't interesting, that just means it isn't working or interesting yet. And as a writer, you have to figure out the angle that makes it better. The questions you should be asking yourself as you mull over the feedback of your pitch are fairly basic. First, did the person you pitched to understand the narrative arc, or were they confused? If they followed along with the pitch, that will likely translate to your story. If they felt like it was a little jumbled, you may want to collect your thoughts again and more effectively apply them to some sort of structure. Second, what part of your pitch did they get most excited about? Knowing this will help you determine which parts of your story help to garner reader engagement. It also helps you figure out where your effort would be best applied in the writing of your piece. Third, which parts of your pitch received less of an enthusiastic reaction? These are parts you may want to spend some time reflecting on. Are they even necessary to your story? If they are, how might you make them more interesting without changing the truth? You can accomplish this through literary devices, placement, and pacing. All of these are tools at your disposal as a creative writer. Finally, and most important, at the end of the pitch, did the person want to read your story? If they're asking to see your drafts, that means that you have something special. No one wants to read something that they think is going to be boring and dry, so you're off to a good start. There's space in the workbook for you to write down your observations and any other notes about your pitch on pages 44 and 45. Ideally, you get feedback from a couple of people. The more the better, so that you can make a decision about which topic you're going to peel open. Thank you for joining me for the second video in the series. Next week, we're going to cover getting a draft down. Throughout this week, work on your pitch, share it with a couple of people, and think about which of your 2 topics you are most prepared to write. I'll see you next Wednesday with the new episode. Until then, happy writing.